Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Arthniti, the budget special episode of Arthniti, where today we're going to talk about industry. Now, India's capital goods manufacturing industry serves as a strong base for its engagement across sectors such as engineering, construction, infrastructure and consumer goods, amongst others. Now, the leading export subsectors of the capital goods sector are heavy electrical and power equipment, earth moving and mining machinery and process plant equipment, together all of them accounting for at least 85% of India's total capital goods exports. Aging equipment requiring replacement, potential for closing import-export gap and massive power capacity addition in future in infrastructure, power, mining, oil and gas, steel and automotive sector and nuclear capacity expansion are some of the key drivers for this sector. So what is the future roadmap for industry? What should be the key focus areas and what are the expectations from this year's budget? For a detailed discussion on this, today we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. Is here with us in the studio, Editorial Director of Business Standard. Welcome, Mr. Bhattacharya. We also have with us Mr. Sandeep Aggarwal, Industry Representative, Chairman of Industry Affairs Committee at PhD, Chambers of Commerce, and Dr. Aruna Sharma, former Secretary, Ministry of Steel, is also joining us. Welcome, Dr. Aruna, there as well. Let me begin, Mr. Bhattacharya, by first trying to understand, the larger macroeconomic aspect of industry's correlation with the overall economic growth. The sector, the industry sector, all these aspects which I mentioned, and how it contributes, in what way, and why it is so significant and important.
Well, I think it's a very important question that you have raised, Mr. Dahiya. As you would know that industry as such, the manufacturing sector, which is also has capital goods sector in it, to which you referred, right now is going through a phase where its capacity utilization levels are just beginning to rise. In a sense that it was staying well below 70%. Now the latest RBI report suggesting that they are beginning to rise, which means there's some demand pickup there. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the time that it needs some sort of a helping hand through the mechanism of the union budget by which this capacity utilization level can be raised, which will have a major knock-on positive effect on jobs and investment and therefore demand as well. Mm-hmm. So now, if the capacity utilization can go up from 70% to say 75%, only if there is investment in the capital goods sector, in the sense that you have more roads, you have more railways, through which the manufacturing sector, the industry, the capital goods sector can supply their stuff to them. Okay. Now, the budget last year, as you saw, increased the capex by around 37%. To 7.5 lakh crore.
And there was a very significant
rise. Today, it's as a percent of GDP, which is a more substantive way of measuring how investments are going up, is actually there's been an increase of 1 percentage point of GDP on government's capex program. Now, next year, industry would very, very keenly watch that what is the increase on government's capex program. Does it go up by 25%? Or does it go up by 30%? The expectation is that it might go up to around 9.5 lakh crore. If that happens, then the industry should feel good, because investment by government on capex would mean more demand for the capital goods industry, manufacturing sector, and therefore it will raise the capacity utilization level. They will make more investment and it will create a virtuous cycle in the economy.
Okay, wonderful. So the direct correlation between the capital expenditure and how in the budget and how the industry works their various aspects of this particular sector. Dr. Sharma, I'd like to bring you in. You've been at the helm of affairs at one of the very important ministries, that the Ministry of Steel, in terms of for us to understand how these various subsectors work in coordination with each other when we're talking about the larger macroeconomic structure. As Mr. Bhattacharya was pointing out, more the capital expenditure, more the industry will have, elbow room to grow. And by industry, I mean all these subsectors.
Absolutely right, because the more expenditure in infrastructure, and India is a low infrastructure country. So, being a low infrastructure country, definitely there is a huge scope for the expansion. And many of the heavy industries products are dependent on the government expenditure on infrastructure because in any economy, it is the government which is a major player of expenditure in the infrastructure unit. So, I totally agree with that. But having said that, what you raised in the introduction about the capital goods, the problem with the heavy industry is that maximum of the capital goods for these industries, whether it is for steel expansion plan or the related ancillaries or others, or whether we look at the other power sectors, we are importing the capital goods, the machineries. So there is a huge scope, and there is a need to have a PLI kind of a scheme to give an expansion and a boost to the capital goods manufacturing. And what you talk to the interconnectivity, you'll be amazed to know that in the power sector, the transformers, the entire electronic part of it, we are importing. So that is another scope which needs to be sort of given a boost when we are talking about it. So they are all interlinked. So more the expenditure in infra, the more the capacity utilization, the more the capacity building, the more the need for the capital goods, and of course, its electronic part. So they are, yes, all linked.
Okay. Import-export gap, which I was mentioning earlier, Dr. Sharma is also referring to that. Now, Sandeep, I'd like to bring you in here. And before we talk about the industry's expectations vis-a-vis this budget, let's also understand the industry's viewpoint of where do we stand when we're talking about these sectors. Heavy industry, capital goods manufacturing. Where do we stand? Where does India stand?
Well, we are low on the ladder, but we are growing. And the investments which the government has brought in from the PSU side also has been significant, but then there has not been a tremendous growth from the private sector side because the lack of capital, and especially lack of cheap capital. That is a problem. We are a $2,000 GDP economy, whereas people are looking for $60,000 economy, which is the European world. Now, if we want to be the first world country, we need to invest so much that we are able to reach to that $60,000 economic levels.
Okay.
Right. So to do that, we need to ensure that our industry actually does not get into losses. Steel industry had a huge bad phase. Madam knows how almost every single company was on sale. Now, what we can do to ensure that even if companies in the steel who made bumper profits in the last year, maybe they are not really interested in making bumper profits. What they are interested is that they should not lose money during the tough times. For that, we have suggested a major reform, which is a dynamic custom duty structure. So whenever there is the prices of steel or wheat or plastics or any material which is on the international indexes, they come down. Whenever the prices come down, then we should ensure that there should be custom duties on those. But whenever those prices go up, then the duties should be removed and it should be automatic. We have proposed, I was talking to Piyush Goyalji today in a meeting, and he has agreed that yes, I will have a meeting with the secretary also on this, and we should ensure that this project, this proposal is discussed with Nirmala Sitharamanji, because we believe that it will be the first in the world. Whenever we put up this thing to anybody, people say, has anybody else in the world done it? But why we need to be second to the world? We need to be way ahead in thinking. And that's where it is going to be a game changer.
Now, that's a very interesting proposal. Let me take that to Dr. Sharma. Dr. Sharma, how feasible is this suggestion coming in from the industry when we're talking about the steel sector specifically in terms of the dynamic custom duty regime, and how much of an energy will it bring to the subsector steel?
See, if I put it, what is needed is a credible and consistent long-term policy, right? This dynamism just based on the price is not going to work, because if you look at it, Today, coking coal prices have gone up heavily, have stabilized now. But in the process, we have imposed import duty of 2.5%. Now, India is dependent on the coking coal imports. Now, this kind of an input cost enhancement creates a problem. So that should go. So when we are talking of dynamic custom duty, there are some things where the clarity of the principles has to be there. Where India is import dependent, to make it more expensive by imposing an import duty does not make logic. Similarly, when we are exporting things to the in steel, you have seen suddenly there was an export duty imposed in the month of May 22, and it was withdrawn in November. In the process, the export came down by 57% in steel. You specifically asked. So when we are talking of these dynamic custom duties, we have to be very careful as the mechanism we adopt, so that there is a proper investigation, there is a discussion which is high speed, not long drawn, like your anti-dumping duty investigation takes 1 to 2 years of time by the time the loss is done. So that has to be taken care of.
Oh, okay. I'm sure, Sandeep, you'd like to add something to that because this is a proposal which is very, very important to the industry. But in addition to what you have to say on this aspect, another thing which I want to ask is we also need to understand where the sector has come, where the industry sector has moved forward vis-a-vis the COVID pandemic. Is it still recovering? Is it out of the recovery phase? Are we on the growth trajectory again, the stable growth trajectory?
Well, I believe that our industry is on a growth trajectory. Stable, there is a problem that in the last 2-3 months, we have seen a huge drop in exports. Everybody is concerned, the industry is concerned, the raw material prices have slumped. And that is where I rest my case with whatever Madam said, fits in exactly into ensuring that these things do not happen in the short time. In the long term, 3 to 6 months period, government can always interject as a policy. But in the short term, on a month-to-month basis, where it cannot interject, this is the scheme. But what we are saying is that exports are down, but they are not out. And India is expanding its markets. So because the raw materials are down, because there was a huge purchase in Europe and America because of the fear of higher prices. Suddenly the price is coming down. The stocks people are maintaining old prices. So they have stopped buying. We should not be afraid. We must understand Indian capital good industry, even steel, even cement. Every product we can make today will be the important aspect of the international trade in future.
Okay. Mr. Bhattacharya, I'd like to bring you in here on this growth comparison. And you were earlier mentioning the capacity utilization figures, the rise there. So one question, of course, is that rise from the pre-pandemic days, or we are looking at it from, during the pandemic period? That's one. And two, in terms of how the industry has moved ahead in the past 1.5 year after the COVID pandemic struck, and the kind of recovery it has had, is it satisfactory in your terms?
Well, in the sense from the investment side, I think there has been steady rise, and we have reached a point where we are certainly above the pre-COVID levels. But on the consumption side, I don't see the same goals have been achieved. And let me also say that this is an issue which cannot be resolved by any fixes on tariff structure. This is a debate that has long outlived its relevance and utility.
So are you referring to larger policy changes?
No, what I'm saying is this, that custom duty changes are not the way out. It will be far better to use, if necessary, and if there are dumping that is taking place, by all means use the anti-dumping provisions. But exchange rate policy is a far more effective instrument of regulating these things. Remember, the last 1 year, exchange rate, India's rupee-dollar parity has depreciated by 9%. Now, domestic industry is already enjoying 9% protection. Now, on top of that, if you want another 10% protection, are we making the Indian industry very uncompetitive? And in the name of the creating a level playing field, you are probably not caring for the consumers. And the consumers in this case are not you and me. Consumers are a large number of small entrepreneurs, small and medium entrepreneurs. They will not get their stuff at the price that they should get to produce their goods. So therefore, there is
ancillary industry.
Ancillary industry. So therefore, custom duty is not a way out. On the contrary, because you are bringing in the government to solve the problem, but actually it might be harmful to the economy.
Okay, Sandeep, how do you respond to that? Is it going to make the industry more uncompetitive? And of course, let's also look at the ancillary industries. The MSMEs and all those would depend upon the growth in the larger, the heavy industry segment.
I tell you, I am listening to the naysayers. Because it is my proposal, I understand it much better, and I can assure that every single misgivings can be taken care. All of them I cannot take care, but it is the Ministry of Commerce, the Finance Ministry who can fix those issues, because basic concept is correct. But what I'm saying here is that today what India requires is huge balance of payment, reduction in the gap. Okay. We are increasing this forex import-export gap to a level which is unsustainable. And this can only be done through more exports through the industry. Industry is only 17% of our economy. But it is the most crucial thing, because if we do not do it, we will be going the Pakistan way or the Sri Lanka way. Okay. We don't want to go that way. And that is only because people do only consumption, but they do not have any production. What if we follow the UK model, where they have closed down most of their industry just to say that consumption is what is the most important thing? Okay. No, it is equally important, but manufacturing is, I would believe, even more important.
Okay, so the demand and supply principle which you're putting in play here, Sandeep. Now, Mr. Bhattacharya, in terms of, yes, I'm sure you would want to respond to that, but in terms of, key drivers for this particular sector, the industry when we're talking about, I mentioned some of them. The import-export imbalance, which is there, there is a scope for a lot of growth. I'm asking you whether you agree to all these points or not. That is one. Second is, capacity addition. When we're looking at sectors like power, mining, oil and gas, infrastructure, and a nuclear capacity as well, energy when we're talking about. So are these the key drivers? Should these be the focus areas when we're talking about the proposals which Sandeep is mentioning?
No, I think there is no denying that we need to take the share of manufacturing sector from 17% currently to 25%, which is our goal. And we don't see that going up. But the contention is that this will not go up by raising custom duties.
So how will it go up?
It will go up if you create a more competitive environment within the country, in which Mr. Goyal competes with Mr. Dahiya and Mr. Dahiya competes with Mr. Bhattacharya. You will not be able to create a competitive environment if you create a customs tariff barrier, and therefore it denies the option, the access of consumers. And in this case, the consumers are a large 93% of India's companies are all small industries. Okay. Now they are getting the supply from those large steel companies, and they have made profit, but the country has not made profit.
So how do you make it more competitive?
So therefore, you create let the exchange rate policy decide what should be your production level, number one. Okay. Number two, if you need specific support, specific industrial policy support, create them. Make sure that the ease of doing business gets better. Make sure that the tariff, the GST rates, they need to be reformed. You need to create industrial clusters. You need to provide concessions, even if the production linked incentive scheme in strategic areas, to my mind, is something that should be acceptable.
Okay. And allocate more to capital expenditure.
More to capital expenditure.
Absolutely. Okay. Dr. Sharma, I'd like to, take your views here. Simple, as Mr. Bhattacharya was referring to it, and Sandeep would also want that to happen. Increasing industry's share from 17% to 25%, the goal which is there. How do we achieve this? And in this budget, what can be done to move at least, few more steps ahead towards that goal?
Absolutely. What I always insist upon is to have a holistic approach to any sector. Like there was a mention about mining. Now, in mining, we are using just 10% of the minerals which nature has gifted us. We have countries like Australia where you will find that the entire economy is mining dependent. So you can see the potential and contribution it can put. But what it needs is a consistent, holistic look at the policy. There are still some irritants in the policy, starting from the surveys to acquisition to getting environment clearances to starting it off to transport, logistics. So all this plugging is needed when we are talking of expansion in any of this sector. So like that, you can do either for textile, either for heavy industries, power sector, everything. And this approach is a must now. And most important is it is not just an increase in the size of the economy, it has to be an inclusive growth and therefore the employment. Now, heavy industry with more automation will not generate. But what I would like to suggest is in the budget, the government should seriously think that the ancillaries of the heavy industries, the CSR amount should be allowed to be spent on them for the expansion, because this will be a game changer where more and more employment is generated when we are going. So if you look at the growth to become 25%, the capital, the credit has to be affordable and easily available to both ancillaries and the major industries. And your GST has to be standardized and blocked to 15%. It can't be very confusing, so that the compliances become easy.
Okay, so no knee-jerk plan out there. Sandeep, final word from you before we bring this to an end in terms of the larger overall, structure when we are looking at vis-a-vis this sector. What is expected? And I'm not just limiting it to this particular budget, because we were talking about 17% to 25%. It will take some time, and the policies and the decisions have to be consistent there as well. No arguments on the fact that there has to be an increase in the capital expenditure, I'm sure. There will be suggestions coming in from the industry, like the one which you mentioned.
And the cost of money has to come down.
And the cost of money has to come down. Yes. See, both of you are saying almost the same thing, but perhaps, from a different perspective as well. But in addition to that, what is it that the industry would want the government to look into and act on in this budget and subsequent budgets as well?
See, I'd say that the government is going on the right way, in the sense that although we are very unhappy because our taxes, GST on petroleum products is not being given back to us, and that increases our cost. So there is a disadvantage to the exporters to that extent. But then when we see that this huge amount of money which is coming to the government is being spent in the road sector, in the building sector, construction, therefore we in a way are happy, because in the improvement of our electrical system, this new RDSS scheme which is coming, where all states, every single city, all the cables, power cables will be replaced by putting in new cables as per the new requirements, and most of them underground, and wherever they are overhead, they will be covered so that people do not die because of the electrification. So huge improvement in the power sector. And why it is required is because we are going to become a $50 trillion economy. Now, how do we become a $1 trillion economy? So what we say is the right way, and the PLI scheme, which we had been championing for a long time, has come, and effectively it has shown last month, December, $1 billion of export from only one company, Apple.
Okay.
Similar exports from Samsung. Yes, it is a corresponding increase in imports of the components. But that is where we want today that Indian industry, when we see the supply chain, Indian industry has big gaps in it. So we can do one thing, we can make electronic, but then below that we do not have the components.
Okay.
Then we can make some raw materials, and then there is a huge gap. We have to fill these gaps, and this is where the government is going. It is trying to put PLI. We have been demanding every time that give a PLI for this product. When we started for telecom, people said, no, they're not possible. Why? Somebody will do it. But then it came for telecom, and telecom has been a huge success. Then the government went and gave it to pharmaceuticals, steel, textile, and they are all coming out successfully.
Okay.
We believe that for the component sector, and because we are feeling this huge crunch because of the chip shortage, all the heavy industry is having a problem.
I was coming to that, the semiconductor part, the emerging technologies there.
Yes.
But we're running short of time. Looks like, the industry has a long list, and the policy makers, Dr. Aruna Sharma is also smiling out there. Looks like they'll have a tough time navigating through these aspects. But it's a very important sector of the economy, and as all of you are pointing out, it is really imperative that we take some good steps from moving from 17% to taking to 25%. Thank you so much, Sandeep, Mr. Bhattacharya, and Dr. Aruna Sharma as well for sharing your thoughts and views on this very important sector. As our experts were, of course, pointing out, as far as industry is concerned, various aspects which need to be taken into consideration here, and not only the short-term policy measures but the long-term one as well, the interventions which have to be made from the government, and of course more spending when we're talking about the capital expenditure. Let's wait and watch as to what lies in the store for industry in Budget 2023, and we'll keep a close watch, keep on bringing you all the detailed developments throughout this week and on the budget day as well. Keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.